Hello. Today I want to talk to you about our preconceived notions of what is good art. As one of those types of people, I liked Braid a lot when I first played it, and so when the creator told me to play Starseed Pilgrim, I just picked it up. Never beat it. I never even managed to clear a single world that first playthrough, but I eventually understood what I was meant to do and how to do it. I went back to it for the first time last year, and I found it just as engaging. I believe I found every world. I even discovered a few gameplay mechanics I was not aware existed. Wow, those would have helped me a lot my first playthrough, but I still liked the game back then. I liked the game for its cryptic puzzles, but also the poetry and the atmosphere it existed in. Switching between frantic puzzles and pressureless exploration was exactly what I was wanting at the time. And while I don't think I'll ever beat the game fully, I enjoy it, and I recommend it. I also think that the poetry aspect of the game plays quite well with the randomness of it. You might get a run that just isn't possible, and you don't know it at the time. That unwillingness to allow a player to optimize, the decision to limit player knowledge, it all just forces the player to accept failure. And I think this is intentional, though perhaps retroactively. I played Probability Zero as well, and I enjoyed it. Not as much as Starseed, as it was missing that atmosphere, but I found it a well-made challenge. It does have a good blend of poetry within the gameplay, but the poetry is mixed within the gameplay, not letting the player really take it in the same way that Starseed does with its hub world. If this game does have hidden mechanics like Starseed, I didn't find them during my only 90 minutes of playtime. But earlier this year, Droqen released a new game called The End of Gameplay, so I played through it. And here are the thoughts that it caused me to have. I think it's a David Lynch quote, but I can't find it anywhere. Anyways, someone, when asked, "What does your art mean?" said something along the lines of, "If I could have gotten this idea out better by just explaining it to you, I would have done that and not made the whole project." If anyone knows this quote, please let me know in the comments. If I've been hallucinating this quote, please cite me when you use it in your day-to-day life. The End of Gameplay is described as such. The End of Gameplay is an anthology, my best and only attempt. It is also described as Droqen's desperate attempt to explain or explore or understand the true meaning of, quote, kill gameplay, end quote. The trailer of this game begins by showing us the creator's face, then showing us some of the, gameplay. In more consumer terms, it's a platformer game where you play as a rabbit and some other things. Each level has a poem. The game took me about an hour, and I believe it was worth my time and money. The rabbit can triple jump, with each of the 3 jumps having a different arc, and it allows for some clever challenges in the few instances where it actually decides to have them. And it may come to a surprise to you, but the game that is titled The End of Gameplay doesn't really have the most exhilarating gameplay. It does have plenty of critiques on gameplay, a jail cell that you aren't able to escape, alternate paths that are impossible, levels that are missing their graphics. It plays on the expectations that we, the player, bring to the game. If you've played a lot of old Game Maker games back in the day, this might come across as an amateur project on its first appearance. The sprites being squares with the image inside, it's clearly an intentional decision, and we know this because he didn't do this in Starseed Pilgrim. But why does it become acceptable if the creator knows better? Why is Picasso or Jackson Pollock high art when your nephew's watercolor belongs on the fridge? I don't have an answer for that. I love a lot of classically trained creative goes off the deep end and makes weird shit type stuff, but why do creatives first have to prove themselves? I mean, I'm going to take both sides here. I personally disagree with the idea, I think, but I will add that I do think the intentionality is obvious, or at least more obvious, in what is communicating in a way that an amateur isn't really going to be able to do. The intentionality behind the art is important, and it does, to some extent, change our relationship to it. If you disagree with me, what are your thoughts on AI art? But at the same time, 90s basement rock is great. These self-taught musicians with just a 4-track are able to communicate emotions in a way no one else was back then. Punk music's raw emotion and energy isn't able to be replicated by experienced musicians, and often punk musicians who actually get more experience as time goes on, well, I just find myself enjoying their music less. But at the same time, if Droqen didn't make this game, I wouldn't have bought it. I would have guessed that it's not worth my time. And if I had played it in that timeline, I wouldn't have written out this script. It is because it is someone who I trust that I'm willing to give this the time of day. In fact, I told myself I was going to make a video essay about this game before I even bought the game. The End of Gameplay knows that we have an understanding of what a game is or will do because other games that we have played, and it both gives into and rejects those ideas. If you are someone who complains about media being pretentious, then don't even touch this. I don't think it is pretentious, but I think if you complain about that a lot, then you're the kind of cynical person who isn't willing to accept anything that's honest. What makes a piece of media pretentious, though? I generally think the accepted idea is that it's, quote, trying to make a statement of truth, reaching for higher goals than it is achieving while being overly proud of itself despite the failure. The issue with being pretentious in this interpretation is being full of oneself. However, I think a lot of people just stop at the part of the definition which is trying to make a statement of truth and write off anything that has something to say at all. People also complain about the lack of subtlety in media. I would argue that Starship Troopers isn't a subtle movie. Then again, a lot of people didn't get that it's anti-fascist, so perhaps they actually mean they don't like feeling preached to, and I mean, I agree with that. I don't like seeing the constant, we all agree Trump is bad posts, because and is it a fucking church? Have we all gathered to shake hands and pat ourselves on the back and say, we have the good beliefs, because if so, I'll be on my way. But I don't think the End of Gameplay hits you over the head with its message. In fact, after beating the game, I wasn't entirely sure what it means to kill gameplay. I find it more to be a deconstruction of the ideas and expectations of what the purpose is behind any game mechanic in a game. The idea that every decision has to play into this overarching whole, that a level must progress this learning process. That's what I got out of this, but I wanted to know more, so I went to his website for more context. As I've mentioned in one of my other videos, when I got to the end of Dark Souls 3, I felt like I'd seen what there was to see and felt no need to continue. Is that a valid experience? I got the final boss one hit away from death and then died. Do I really need to land that final hit to say I've experienced Dark Souls 3? Why would one extra button press change the value of my gameplay? For myself, I don't think it does. I've beaten Orphan of Cause, and it didn't even take me that many attempts. I don't feel the need to prove to myself that I am good at these games. I quit because I just hadn't been enjoying my time with it overall, and I felt like I'd had enough. In a post called Do Not Love Gameplay, Droqen says that, quote, when we make games, we make judgment machines, and to judge is to reject. When a game passes judgment, just as when we pass our judgment, we are not loving. We are not accepting our player as they are. Machines and gameplay are not capable of love, but we are. End quote. So should all games be without challenge? If I beat Dark Souls 3, what does that change? I've made no material difference in my life, but I do love these games. It is the challenge itself that draws me to them, the rush of overcoming these insurmountable hurdles. But what does it teach me? I mean, some people have said that Souls games have genuinely helped them out of a bad time in their life, similar to how going to a gym can help people feel control in their life in some way. Droqen says in a post called A Series of Validating Decisions, what is the function of obstacles in these games? Only to challenge players to change. When I submit to its forces, getting nothing out of it, who does that make me? Why would this person be permitted passage? Why does the game designer choose to accept this person, this version of me, specifically? End quote. I am okay with Soulsborne games rejecting the version of me that doesn't learn its rules. I understand that it provides me with no real benefit beyond a momentary endorphin rush. I've enjoyed learning each game's own rhythm. Not Dark Souls 2, I'm not counting that one. I find myself going to the series because it is an experience I can't get anywhere else. But there are plenty of people who don't get anything out of it. Now, the Souls games do also let you summon online players to help you get through the places of struggle, so I think that resolves the whole difficulty conversation. You can get through with a lot of help from others, and I think that is part of the game series that people who complain about the difficulty tend to overlook, probably because the games also don't really tutorialize how to do that, but anyways. I'm okay with being molded by Soulsborne into someone who it will allow to engage with it. I trust them to have something underneath that friction. But I think that this idea of killing gameplay has more meaning to a developer than to a player or writer like myself. Droqen explains that, quote, to not love gameplay is to allow myself to question it, or to invite myself to question it, or to demand that gameplay be questioned, end quote. And I think that is a takeaway that I can agree with. This was the takeaway I got from levels being unbeatable, that a game's design decisions are just parroting past ideas from so long back without really exploring what it says and why it says it. Quote, not everything needs to have a function. Sometimes it is enough to have a cause for a purposeless blind effect, end quote. What purpose does cloud watching have? What purpose do constellations serve? Why stop and smell the roses? When was the last time you actually took in the smell of the air of your neighborhood? I did it when I took out the garbage last week, and its warmth reminded me of visiting my grandparents in a different state. Droqen continues. I am realizing that gameplay is not capable of love, that gameplay is not worth my loving. End quote. I still love gameplay, but the idea of questioning gameplay, demanding that it be questioned, is an important step for the medium as it goes forwards. We have been building on top of a foundation of previous design decisions without concern for what they say themselves, or why they say that. I guess I don't consider questioning as a form of judgment or a lack of love, or judgment incompatible with love. I've always rationalized it myself as a means of trying to reach some greater truth by comparing notes. I find it to be more of a statement of, your reality is different from mine. Have we done the same math to get here? I do not understand and would like to. In one level, the game asks, how should I kill the bunny so the bunny knows how to do better next time? How should I kill the bunny so that the bunny knows it's the bunny's fault? How, and never why. There are 1,000 kinds of harm. Why should gameplay be any different? At least this is a poison the bunnies pick. That's a weird quote for me to approach after getting the platinum achievement in Elden Ring Night Rain. In the end of gameplay, the game killing the player is not doing so to tell the player you've done something wrong. Failing a jump is not a critique of the player, it's a statement about developers. Dying might feel unfair in a few places that you can die, but the places where it is even possible are so limited that it becomes clear that the player is meant to use it to learn not about how to play better, but why we use negative reinforcement in games. It's a negative proof of the game's ideas. Droqen and I talked back and forth on Blue Sky for a bit. I asked about a few other games that might be counted as kill gameplay. I asked about games like Pyre, who let you fail every level and the story continues, and he disagreed because it is still asking you to win. It is still benefiting you more to win and only giving you a compensation upon losing. I also asked about Kentucky Route Zero because, it's me, so of course I did. He had this to say, quote, I'm not a real adventure gamer, but I can understand how the game's approaching of a historically more gameplay-laden context could be killing gameplay, not as an objective point in space, but as a movement in a direction. Droqen did end up agreeing with me about Kentucky Route Zero's "It's Too Late to Love You" scene, saying it is, quote, "This is honestly sublime, seen from this perspective. It's like a creative collaborator. It's giving you more than you had the capacity to say, but it's still inspired by what you said. It feels very impactful in a way things normally don't or can't in games." End quote. I also asked if mechanics and systems were necessary for kill gameplay, because a game like Proteus felt like it has a different goal. Because if the end of gameplay wanted to remove any friction the player might feel from the game, it wouldn't have gravity. Jumping is a thing that lets the player be engaged with the gameplay. The game's jumping mechanics are there to give the player a form of expression in a similar way that any game that lets you jump anywhere does. You don't need to make me go any faster, but I'm going to be jumping there the entire travel time. Why isn't Proteus kill gameplay? Because its intentions are different. Genre is a weird thing that I don't understand. Personally, I only believe in subgenre. The only thing that could be friction in Proteus is if you find the movement speed too slow. You will reach every point on the map if you walk towards it. There's not any expression in the movement. Proteus isn't really playing with your expectations. It's more just a reduction of other types of games down instead of a recontextualization. The player is observing the world, but any form of engagement is cerebral and not mechanical. And I think this is the defining difference between them. And I love both of these games. Droqen also has an itch.io page where you can play some of his other games. I played through some of them in preparation for the video in case there is anything else I might be missing. When I booted up Oubliette 5 Octopus, I remembered this one. This little octopus game I played all the way back in 2020. Oh, that's a long time. It's a beautiful game that I don't think I fully understand emotionally. I want to save the drowned character because, I don't know, maybe it's because I have some personal attachment to Cave Story. I finally managed to get the sea exit ending this playthrough and it felt bittersweet. Replaying this game felt like hearing a song that I had forgotten. The game gives me so many emotions I find hard to put into words, which, I guess it's interesting that this is one of the few Droqen games without any poems in it. And it says everything it needs to without them. It's free and won't take up much of your time, so please give it a shot. I think it's the best starting point for this developer's games. The other one that stuck with me is Cloud Exile. I've never played a game with a greater sense of hopeless longing. I won't spoil anything about it beyond that, but I think it does a good job getting everything it is trying to say across. The end of gameplay is a game that you've probably made up your mind about before you've even played it. I did. I liked the developer, and I knew I'd like it. I decided this is going to be good, and so I paid the $20 for it, and I got what I had wanted. The $20 price tag I think is a bold decision, and I agree with it. Maybe it's because I'm someone who tries to push people away who won't actively engage with my art. Maybe it's because of sunk cost fallacy that makes me say I've paid $20, so I have to believe it was good, but I've paid more money for worse food, and I've paid for a speeding ticket, and I didn't like that at all. I grew up without a lot of spending money, and now that I have some, it's been difficult to let myself spend my own money on things that I don't need. Unless those things are my CD collection, and that's not hard to spend my money on, and that is a problem. This game isn't Starseed Pilgrim. It's not Probability Zero. It's not a puzzle game. It's not endlessly replayable. It's got no skill tree. It's got no branching narrative. I think this is a game for developers, and as an ex-game developer, it speaks to me. I think this is a game for critics, and as someone who thinks too much about stupid topics, it speaks to me. I think this is a game for people who like poetry, and as a poet, I like it. I think this is a game for people who've spent even 10 seconds looking at it with interest. I think this is a game for people who like vulnerability more than being cool. I think this is a game for people who have been told they like something pretentious more than once in their life.
At this point in the video, if your name isn't Alexander Martin, you are welcome to leave. You don't have to leave, and you don't have to stay either. Hey Alex. Can I call you that? Thanks for watching, and for having a chat on Blue Sky with me about kill gameplay. It helped me work through some of the ideas here. I know I'm just making a video about a game, but I've always considered myself to be an artist first and a critic second. These videos that I've been making have just been a means of me keeping up with my writing skills since graduating college, and learning some new skills in the process. But they've also served as a reason for me to think more in depth about topics that I otherwise wouldn't, or just reflect on my own life. I don't want this to come across as me doing self-promotion, but I don't know how to talk about my own relationship to my own art without sounding like a shill. I've been playing some of my own music in the background during this video, but it's not the part of my music that I feel represents the stuff I like about my own music. The stuff I love making is the harsh and hard to access. I don't know if you've listened to anything by the artist Shushu, who I don't have up here, but I love it, and it's inspired all of my art. I find inspiration across mediums. My novel was inspired by the director Tarkovsky and H-Bomber Guy's video about Pathologic. My music has been inspired by Visual Glitch Art and Kentucky Route Zero. In my art, I know I make it obtuse to force people to engage with it more fully. I think it's the same part of me that at times makes myself a little bit too much to see if people will be pushed away by the rough edges of me. Because if it's going to happen, I guess I'd rather it happen early. I try not to do that, but I still find myself doing it in retrospect. I try to put some comedy in these videos, but I've been told by my friends that my jokes don't always read as that. I'm working on a follow-up to my first novel, and I'm realizing it's about the exact same themes of family relationships, memory, and anger at God. But this one isn't metafiction. The characters are still in some way me, but at this time they're the worst parts of myself being amplified. I also used to make games. None of them were ever any good, and that's a whole nother story that I've been making a video about for over a year now. I've had ideas for a game that I think follows some of your tenets of kill gameplay. I'd probably just end up using RPG Maker because at this point I don't know how to code anymore. If I make that game, codenamed Grieve Tiger, it's going to be a western based on a side character from a tabletop campaign I ran. But in reality, it's just me processing grief from a pet cat I lost back in 2018. I've been making and sharing stuff on the internet since May 16th, 2006. Technically, my dad was the one posting for me until November 27th, 2009, but I don't think that really makes a difference. I'm probably the way I am because my mom was a book snob, and my dad was a film snob, or at least half of one. And then, once I moved out of my parents' house, I moved in with roommates who were full film snobs. And so, as such, I'm a music snob and a game snob, and I'm way heavier on the film snob side of things than the inverse. I think taking in good art helps me make better art. I've always classified my art as some form of obstruct art, and I don't mean abstract, I mean obstruct. I've had this belief that I should put things to block the viewer from immediately getting what I'm doing, be that ambient moments in an album or harsh noises in my songs that just catch you off guard. I don't want the consumer to get anything from my art without them putting in any of the effort themselves. I like being consumer hostile, and it's certainly given me exactly what you'd expect. No fans. Still, I found myself drawn to this idea for as long as I've been a pretentious asshole. As someone who's done a lot of poetry, I like working with the visual form of poems, and I think that's why I really liked your poetry in Starseed Pilgrim. I'll be honest though and say that I haven't done anything with the visual side of poetry since switching to doing more song lyrics than poems. Since they are never seen and only heard, It hasn't been a thing I've really felt a need to do. And the older poems, where I actually messed with the visual form of them, I can't recognize that version of myself anymore. And I guess I feel some kind of loss from that. I'll read you a poem of mine now and then talk about it. And after I finish the poem, I'd like you just to sit with it before I give my explanation. The name of the poem is Molko El Paso. I'll sleep through the day. Past eyes see, and I feel less alone. If you just sink a little lower, someone might sell all you've had. Whispers of I could make you feel better during sleepless nights under strangers' ceilings. Self-medication, all distance is the same in 55-minute loops. When I might sink a little lower, try to get a different handle on things, yet you still see. When I thought I turned away, I still look at foreign ceilings. Now I'm stuck on rewind. Okay. I guess I asked, what do you think it's about? What meaning, what emotion, what do you get from the poem? Which, I know this is a lot to ask, sorry. This is a poem that I had been trying to write for so long, but I eventually wrote it this way after several attempts of completely scrapping the thing. The poem is about visiting my grandfather in El Paso, Texas, the last time I visited him there before he passed away. My family would pretty often drive to El Paso from our home in Orange County, California. It's about listening to the album Meds by Placebo in a portable CD player I had with me while my grandfather was watching Storage Wars. It's about the strong desire I felt for escapism back then and how I would escape into stories I'd tell myself, trying to find a way out from those bad feelings. The line Stranger Ceilings is a reference to Neon Genesis Evangelion, and Stuck on Rewind is a reference to Follow the Cops Back Home by Placebo. Try to get a different handle on things is specifically referencing alcohol and against escapism through that means when life gets shitty. And I think my rejection of escapism has still followed me from that time in El Paso. I think my own hatred of escapism is why I like and make difficult media. I don't know if any of that was visible to you in my poem. In one of your past videos, you said you don't agree with Death of the Author, and personally I think we have a disagreement here on that, but I think that disagreement comes from a different understanding of what Death of the Author is. You argued that since the art would not exist without you, the author, even if the viewer didn't exist, the art still would, and therefore the author is important. I don't really disagree with that, but I think the disagreement we have is that the audience can never fully know you or your intentions, and we only can go off what is in the text. You can say what the art is about yourself, but then we run into an issue that I don't know if you've experienced, but I know I have with my own poetry. Have you ever written a poem about a specific thing only to have another event happen in your life that recontextualizes the poem into a completely new meaning for yourself? That in some way is a part of Death of the Author that you are doing to yourself. You have chosen to disregard your own past interpretation, killing a past version of yourself, your own past established canonical interpretation. You have killed the author. But also, I get it completely. Nothing hurts more than having someone like art you care about the wrong way. It hurts more than them just disliking it, and people telling me they love my ambient stuff. It kind of hurts because I feel way less of a connection to that stuff than I do all of my lyrical stuff. And I hate that. The last thing I have to say is this. I'm glad to see you talking about doing projects with other people. I found collaboration to be the thing that keeps me and my art healthy. It's easy for me to get way too in my own head without collaboration. I have used art as a form of therapy, since my job only offers therapy through the terrible app BetterHelp. I guess this is the best option I have. I go back and forth between thinking, maybe I need therapy, or no, the world is just fucked, and this is the correct response to a fucked world. Still, though, I still sometimes get concerned about the things I write down, but getting them out and seeing them has been a great benefit for me. I appreciate you sharing these vulnerable parts of yourself. I think I have an easy time being vulnerable because I don't have an audience. No one is going to interact with the things I make. Unlike me, though, you have an audience. So I respect you for keeping that vulnerability, for continuing to make art that, as you say, bleeds. I thank you for making art that has allowed me to make this video. If I ever make another game, you'll be a part of the reason why I did. I'd be happy to continue this conversation at some point if you'd like. Is there anything I got horribly wrong or surprisingly right? I'd love to hear about it.